Well, welcome to another Black History Conversations. This is a bit of a special one because we are on Friday the 5th of May and on Saturday the 6th, it's the coronation. So, wow, lots of things going on. Excuse me, I'm just trying to get my screen sorted out here. And it's Black History Conversations, season 9, and this is the 103rd conversation. I don't know if you can see I've got a bar that goes across my screen that obscures some of the PowerPoint. Anyway, okay then. So welcome to you all, and a special welcome to Vivian Crawford, who's joined us from Jamaica. Vivian was the executive director of the Institute of Jamaica until recently, and he's already been entertaining us with marvellous stories. Right, okay then. So what we're going to do is to explore the links of British monarchy with the slave trade, because a few people seem to have woken up lately in the UK and recognised that actually the royal family's money must have come from somewhere, and we had no idea where it came from. So the Guardian is doing valiant work, as is practically every TV programme over here has got something about it. So this is how I put the poster together. So the British kings and queens have supported and profited from slavery. So from Elizabeth I to William IV, over a period of 270 years, monarchs had links to the slave trade. Very interesting. Now, King Charles has signalled the first explicit support for research into the monarchy's slave ties. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. Okay. Just somebody else coming in to join us. And also I've included this illustration. Yeah? Hello? Right, okay then. So
Yeah,
I'm just I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute while we just sort out who's joined us. Hello. Telephone number 79.
It's me. It's Roland. It's Roland.
Oh, it's Roland.
Roland.
Ronald again. Okay, close yourself. I'm just going to mute you then, Ronald. Roland, sorry. Okay then. So Roland does have difficulty with the connectivity. Right, back to the start of the PowerPoint presentation then. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am. They're the Wurundjeri people. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. This is an acknowledgement of country. This happens in Australia at the beginning of all meetings, gatherings, events, activities. We share an acknowledgement of country. If we have people with us who are from the First Nations, then they can welcome us to country, but I can't welcome you to country. I can only acknowledge. So it's an opportunity for anyone to show respect for the traditional owners and the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to country. And that's what the traditional owners call the land, they call it country. One of the things we've been exploring at the start of Black History Conversations is to explore ways to acknowledge the injustice of European actions in invading, taking possession of, and exploiting so many peoples and countries in the world. So we've been trying to get the wording right and try different variations. So this is today's variation on my wording. This is from me. I acknowledge the injustice of the European nations in invading, taking possession and exploiting so many countries in the world. As a person with European heritage, whose ancestors may well have been engaged in some way with the trade in transatlantic slavery, as one side of my family came from Lancaster, which is a coastal community near Liverpool. And my family are undertaking research this summer in the UK to explore our heritage. And I've come back onto the screen to talk with you because as a little girl, I didn't think it was at all unusual that my granny had a silver biscuit barrel. I didn't think it was at all unusual that we had silver cutlery and we had cut glasses to drink water out of. I didn't think it was at all unusual for a number of other things. And it wasn't until a few years ago when my grandmother told me about, what did she call him? Lord Jim or something. I can't just think. And he came from Scale Hall. So we've done some research. We've actually discovered there is a place still called Scale Hall. It's a big housing estate now in Lancaster. And then I've done a bit more research along with some cousins who are researching the family history who are in Canada. We're going to do more on that story. So I'm going to keep you informed about that and share that story. And it's really interesting because with the Heirs of Slavery project, it's not just the very rich people. It's just like ordinary folks like me and my family. We can just as easily have links back to engagement in the transatlantic trade and plantation ownership and colonialisation and all the other 101 other things that Europeans managed to get up to at that time. Okay, so I just wanted to share that. Hope that's okay. Right, so back we go then. Oopsie-daisy. And now this was on the TV today. Right, so I take photographs of the TV screen. Apology, reparation and repatriation of artifacts and remains. The Guardian has done an article today, which apparently, I'm not sure in your terms, it might have been your yesterday, I can't remember. We, the undersigned, call on the British monarch, King Charles III, on the date of his coronation being May the 6th, 2023, to acknowledge the horrifying impact on and the legacy of genocide and colonialisation of the Indigenous and enslaved peoples. So this was a chat show that we have. It's called The Drum, and Mick Gouda, who's an Aboriginal person, he spoke about it, and he said that we're living history. We're living with the impact of colonialisation in the present. And others were speaking on the programme. But The Guardian came up with the headline, Commonwealth Indigenous Leaders Demand Apology from the King for Effects of Colonisation. So that's interesting that it's so absolutely pertinent. So a friend of mine here phoned me up and said, Liz, she says, turn the telly on. She said, they're talking about your stuff. So this is about monarchy, colonialisation and the slave trade. I know people use the word colonisation, but I sometimes use the word colonialisation, and I'm not quite sure which of us are right. There is an appalling image here, a truly, truly appalling image of a white angel holding chains in one hand and a sword in the other hand. And that white angel is standing on the neck, on the head of a black person who's surrounded seemingly by flames. I don't know if any of you know where this picture comes from. Well, it comes from this incredibly ornate, bejeweled thing that is worn around the necks of British officials who work abroad. I don't think they're using it anymore, but it wasn't until a few years ago, and Yasser Safari was one of the people who first drew my attention to it, was that the Governor General of Jamaica had been given this image to wear. So if you've not heard any YouTube interviews with George Monbiot, he's fascinating, and he just tells it how it is. So everything you know about the British Empire is a lie was the YouTube that I was watching, and he was talking all about this. Oh, it was on a Facebook thing. Okay, right now, of course, oopsie-daisy. Sorts of interesting things happening here. Okay, so when Prince Charles, as he was then, was at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. He said that the roots of our contemporary association run deep into the most painful period of our history. As I continue to deepen my own understanding of slavery's enduring impact, there are some, and then he carried on talking. So I picked that up off a YouTube recording of this. And then the interviewer says that there are certainly indications that he's conscious of the wrongs and ways the royal family haven't seemed to express before. So for those of us who are learning about Black history, perhaps it's wrong of us to criticise Prince Charles for not knowing so much about British history, but I would have thought he was one of the people been around for long enough and been to enough important events and got access to all the resource in the world that he says that he's still continuing to deepen. Well, good news. So it seems as if this is the first explicit support for research into the monarchy's slavery ties. Now, The Guardian are just absolutely blistering along with this, along with the Cotton, what is it called, the Cotton Connection, that the Manchester Guardian itself was, what's it called, Cotton something.
Yeah, I can't think.
Okay, so on we go. And here's another character we ought to celebrate, David Conn, because he seems to be exploring this area and writing it all up. So from Elizabeth I to William IV, 270 years. Now, some of us didn't like history at school and didn't take an awful lot of notice. So I can't reel off the kings and queens of Britain. So we're going to have a little look and see if we can actually find out who did what. So I'm going to be awarded my PhD after this because I will have discovered what the royal family's links with slavery was, and apparently somebody else is doing their PhD on this. So from 25 minutes research on Google, I've found the following information. Anyway, that slavery is hardly a new subject, but it was the response from the palace that was new. Okay. The palace says it's cooperating with the independent study into the links between the royal family and the slave trade. I'm sorry, these are all picked. You can see I was picking off the TV here. Jolly good, right. So was it so long ago that they were offering tacit support to the research into the ties of slavery to the monarchy? And he opened, he's absolutely said, absolutely, have a look, and then you'll know more about I do. And you know, I'm not going to carry on with that. Anyway, then popped up on this same YouTube program, Princess Anne, on her take on the monarchy under King Charles. Quite entertaining, really. I spend quite a lot of time researching and watching TV programs. Princess Anne, though, thought that you shouldn't be too focused on the time scales and periods of history because it's not like that, she said. And recognising the British monarchy's place in colonisation, in slavery, were one thing, but the institutions acting on it, finding a new pathway forward, would take generations of work. Anyway, if you want to read that one up, I can send you the email. However, the wonderful Professor Vereen Shepherd, the UK government and royals called on to investigate slavery after the Guardian's apology. Now, one of the big issues is about, is it an apology? Is it an acknowledgement? Are you saying sorry? And living here in Australia, sorry, we have a sorry day here. It's called Sorry Day. And it's a sorry about the stolen generations, the mixed race Aboriginal children who were taken from their families and made to live in white families. And there have been other wider apologies for different things. So each country's taking things in different ways, but it's fascinating. Vivian's joining us back again. Right, okay. So what are the British monarchy's historical links to slavery? Difficult to say how much of the royal family's wealth is owed to the slave trade, because obviously they were receiving a lot of tax and income from other sources. But the past links date back to the 16th century. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that PowerPoint. Just check who's here with us at the moment. So have you seen anything else? Have I picked up most of what's being said at the moment?
Liz, Vivian?
Yeah.
Yeah, may I speak?
Yes.
Yeah, I was discontinued for about few seconds, but
Yeah.
I saw where you stated a comment about Elizabeth I to King William IV.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say very briefly that King William visited Jamaica. He was the sailor prince, and he visited Jamaica with Lord Nelson. Lord Nelson, you know, when he returned from Nicaragua in the 1780s, he was too ill to return to Jamaica, to England, and a Jamaican lady at Port Royal named Cuba Cornwallis nursed him to perfect health. So Nelson spent a year in Jamaica, Lord Nelson, and when he returned to England, he told Prince William then about Jamaica. So Prince William came to Jamaica, and he stayed at number 10 East Street, what is now the Institute of Jamaica. His photograph is there, without any name, of course, perhaps in incognito. And when he went to England, when he got married, he told his wife, Queen Adelaide, after whom a street in Spanish Town, our former capital, is named. And she sent to Cuba a lovely dress. Cuba said it was too lovely to be worn, she should be buried in it. So that's a piece of history I thought I would share with you, that when we go to Trafalgar Square and see Nelson's statue, we remember the support that Cuba Cornwallis gave to Nelson. Thank you, Liz.
That is just an amazing story. Thank you so much. You're such a treasure trove of knowledge about your history, our shared history. That's fantastic. Okay, right. My next. Sorry, anybody else coming in?
Yes, good. I did some research into the image of an enslaved person that was brought over as a garden ornament by William III from Holland. And I discovered that, of course, the Dutch were in the Caribbean, and at the time they were in Belize, what is now Belize, and he owned a lot of the enslaved before he became King of England. And an artist was sent out to Belize and did some extraordinary art pictures of the enslaved, all with a W for William burnt into their skin. They were branded with his, what's the word, moniker or whatever. And so that connection was there, which I don't think the Guardian mentioned, but it is a strong link. So
that's really, really interesting. And I find it so fascinating when you've got a group of people like we get from time to time talking about these things, that more bits of information do come forward. Now, I think you've probably seen this this before. My PowerPoint's disappeared. Just a minute, sorry. Right, so not that PowerPoint, but this PowerPoint, right. Now this is my quick, this is what I'm going to show you now. I'll actually show you the Guardian article that it's taken from. So I'll just try and do that first. Right, okay then. So this is the online Guardian, and it's from David Connigan, and it was the 6th of April. So he's done the research, some brief background research, and this is probably what you saw, I think, is it, Sylvia? The British kings
Yes,
and queens
yes,
supported.
I cut them all out. Yes.
Well, wait till you see what I've done, because it's
Right.
quite fascinating. So it goes through all the kings and queens at
Yes.
the time. So what I'm going to do now is that I've done a PowerPoint with all these. I haven't quite got to the end because there's a whole lot of them, but I'm now going to show you that, if I can. Can you see where it says the kings and queens who supported and profited from slavery on a PowerPoint?
Yes.
No. Oh, it says my screen sharing was. Garrick, you all right? Garrick, got your hand up. Anyway, you can, any of you interrupt at any time. It's not rude, but it's that when I've got the PowerPoint on the screen, I can't see everybody who's there and see whether you want to have a chat or not. Garrett's still got his hand up. Right, so the British kings and queens who support and profited from slavery. Right, next. Oh dear, stuck with this. Okay, so Queen Elizabeth I, right.
Mm.
So she was a Tudor queen, and she gave a large royal ship to the slave trader John Hawkins in 1564 in exchange for a share in the profits of the voyage. On the trip, Hawkins captured many African people and seized 600 more from Portuguese ships, according to Nick Hazelwood in his book The Queen's Slave Trader. That seems to be a pretty direct involvement, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about Queen Elizabeth, there was an interesting programme on the TV here in Australia, as I was saying, and it was comparing Queen Elizabeth I with Queen Elizabeth II and saying how many similarities there were in their life. It certainly made you sort of think again about Queen Elizabeth I, certainly. But obviously, the way the royal family has kept power is because they're incredibly wealthy.
Yeah.
And what about James I? Okay, so he was the first Stuart king granted royal connected merchants a monopoly on trade in Africa. So kings are so powerful that they can create monopolies, and they formed the Guinea Company. And those of us who are old enough can remember that a guinea used to be you won on horses, didn't you? Or bet on horses in guineas, I think. And guess who used to really be into horse racing? It's a royal pursuit. And the Guinea Company provided enslaved people for English-owned tobacco plantations in Virginia, America, according to Peter Fryer's book, Staying Power. So what he's obviously doing in picking out these little bits is he's also introducing more resources for us to read and find out more about these different kings. Now, I'm a good teacher. Well, I was a teacher, not that good. I was going to ask different people to read these out, but it might be a bit squirmy. Then we get to Charles I. Okay, so he was 1625 to 1649. Something happened just after 1649, Vivienne Crawford. But this king granted a monopoly license, another monopoly, to the reconstituted Guinea Company in 1632 to transport enslaved people. That was what they did. The Guinea Company's job was to transport enslaved people. English colonies were established where the economies were based on the exploitation of enslaved people's labours, beginning with Barbados, which was the first, in inverted commas, black slave society, and that was 1636. I find the word English interesting because I'm half English and half Welsh. And there were a lot of Welsh people who were involved in establishing these so-called English colonies, and the Welsh kind of get away with not hearing about things. It wasn't until after 1700 that the Scots started being involved as well. Okay, so what happened to Charles I? I said chopped off. And so this PowerPoint page is about Cromwell, but it isn't included in the Guardian article because Cromwell wasn't a king or a queen. But we know that while Cromwell's Commonwealth was in power, he gathered together forces, including Gifford Pennant from Wales, and they sailed over to, come on then folks, you're going to have to help me here. They sailed over, and first of all, they were going to try and capture Haiti, was it?
Jamaica.
No, they
Jamaica.
weren't aiming. They weren't aiming for Jamaica.
Ah,
they were
sorry. Right.
Where were they aiming for, Vivian?
Hispaniola.
Hispaniola, which is now called Cuba.
No, Domrep.
Oh,
Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic.
Cuba is far east.
And as they weren't successful there,
they came to Jamaica. Yes, yes.
On Jamaica.
1655, they came to Jamaica.
1655.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the story that I'm interested in researching, Gifford Pennant was one of the, well, he was master of the horse of Cromwell's invading forces. So when Cromwell was no longer in power and the Commonwealth, the monarchy had been restored, then Gifford Pennant would have been on the wrong side.
That's
and
right.
I think that's why he stayed in Jamaica.
Yeah.
But they were also given land and given opportunities, but the idea of going back, because it was Venables and what was it, Penn, who were the...
Admiral Penn and General Venables.
Yeah, they were the leaders of the invasion of Jamaica. And when they returned to Britain, they ended up in the Tower. So they didn't stay in the Tower, but they ended up there. So it was obviously an interesting time, but I digress a bit there. Gareth, do you want to come in on something?
Yes, Liz. I mean, what you've done, you've identified, you know, the royal connection in only, so we say, half an hour or so. Prince Charles or King Charles could do the same.
Yes.
However, he has commissioned University in Manchester to look into this whole thing. But of course, the royal family been educated in St. Andrews in Scotland.
Yeah.
And on the curriculum, you would not get this information taught to those at all.
No.
So, but contrary to that, the people in the Commonwealth, my own Jamaica education under the British, I was taught only about the British kings and queens, nothing else. So can you see the contradiction? So the royal family is not taught about, you know, world history or their own history, but they teach other people about their history. And so, you know, this whole hypocrisy that exists, you know, is interesting to note that, and we've mentioned this several times, that our conversation around Black history is really British history and world history. And, you know, we're not separating those because they're interconnected. You know, some of the ships that left Liverpool in 1699, you know, is from this side of the country. So we can see the bigger picture and the connectiveness of the transatlantic slave triangle. And when Richard comes next week, I'm sure he'll be talking a little bit about that triangular trade and those links.
Absolutely. Thank you. Vivian.
Question. Did you say that the royal family has undertaken research about the royal family and enslavement?
Yes, the king has authorized a full research into evidence that the royal family is connected in slavery.
Sorry. So all this report that Liz is saying and you are saying, it's a lie then. Because
Well,
if research is going to be undertaken, it means that we are mischievous. And the question then I hasten to ask is, for this discussion, to what end is that research being undertaken? Because one would need to know the objectives. When the truth, if ever if it is found out, what will be the result? Because if I do not know what the end is going to be, I don't want to start the journey.
Yeah, that's a good point, because again, this is connected with reparation. And so this is the issue. So if he can identify, I guess what he's thinking, if I can identify, you know, that my family is connected with slavery for 400 or 500 years, then, you know, the whole idea of responding to reparation would be more appropriate.
Please, that's a rhetorical question. That is asking if the Pope is Roman Catholic or if water is wet.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
Right, okay then, back we go. Right. I love the interactiveness. I've just popped this into that blank space that I had on my PowerPoint. This is Liz Millman's quick route to a PhD. That's what I said earlier, Vivian. 25 minutes research on the internet, and I found out all this information. But what I really feel quite sorry, because there's actually a lady who is doing a PhD at Manchester University, and she has the weight of this research on her shoulders. But it's kind of ridiculous because so much is already known. So it's just a case of pulling it all together. So I hope that that doesn't contradict your way of looking at things. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to. How do you make it big? Oh, I remember. Contradict your way of thinking, Vivian. Okay, so right after Cromwell died. Sounds about as boring as my history lessons used to be in school. After Cromwell died, the first king after the monarchy was Charles II. And now, of course, we've got Charles III. Okay, so in effect, he made the slave trade a state-sponsored exercise. He invested in a slave trading business called the Company of Royal Adventurers of England Trading into Africa, and gave it a royal charter. A bit posh. Notice England again. When the company was dissolved in 1672, the king moved his patronage to the Royal Africa Company. And we've all heard horrendous stories of the letters RAC burnt into the skins of enslaved prisoners. This company would transport more enslaved people from Africa to the Americas than any other single organization in the history of the transatlantic trade. Now, remember, this was also the time when in Jamaica, British people were trying to set up plantations, they were needing workforces, and there was all the South American plantations and activities, mines to be supplied with a workforce. Just a really difficult memory. Then James II, he was a governor of the, he was governor of the Royal Africa Company, and awarded 500 guineas. That's £500 and 500 extra shillings for his extraordinary services in 1677. So that's a definite benefit of a member of the royal family. And as king, he was the company's largest shareholder until he sold the shares. Shares, business, all this was being developed at this time and because of this business. After he was deposed in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, according to the historian K.G. Davis in his book, The Royal Africa Company, James made £6,210 from his investment, equivalent of £1 million today, according to the most conservative estimate. Okay, so he sounds like he was thoroughly involved, and more to learn there about the Glorious Revolution. I did the cut and paste this time in a different way for Queen Anne. Now, Queen Anne is remembered for the Union of England and Scotland in 1607, which formed the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Ireland wasn't involved at that time. She also dramatically expanded the nation's slave trading activities by securing from Spain, 1713, the Asiento de Negros, a monopoly right to supply enslaved African people to Spain's colonies in South America. This contract was fulfilled by the South Sea Company. Oh dear. This PhD is going to have to be really, really long if it goes into lots and lots of this detail. Right, this is a bit small. I'm sorry. I'm just going to stop sharing and make that a bit bigger so I can read what it says. Sorry. Right, we're up to George I now. And then I have to go back to the newspaper because I didn't get the rest of it transferred to the PowerPoint, but there's about 3 more monarchs to go through. So George I was the governor of the South Sea Company and held a substantial shareholding. Histories of the company overwhelmingly dwell on the South Sea bubble, the 1720 rise and collapse of the company's share price. A few focus on the nature of its business, the haciendo, the contract to supply 4,800 adult healthy males to Latin America annually. John Carswell, in his book, The South Sea Bubble, calculated that despite the collapse in shares, the king made a large profit from his investment. Oh, goodness gracious me. Did you see that? Or did I manage to move? I took the screen share off. I'm sorry, I'm tired. Right, so this was the George the First one. It was George the First, Mad King George. Does anybody know? Queen
Yes.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
So he was
No, he wasn't. No, sorry.
Right, okay then. Well, do you know which George was?
Third.
The George III,
Yeah.
Okay.
because
Thank
of
you.
him, the American colonies were lost.
Yeah.
1766.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, you see, the thing is, you see, Vivian, you're obviously listening in your
But
proficiency setting.
I am not a historian. I have no qualifications in history. My story is fireside chat from my ancestors.
Right. Okay, now we're going to go back to the, where are we? We've done James II. We've done
George I.
We're on to William III now, right? So I'm just going to share the screen, and we're actually just.
You're out of order. He came before Anne.
Oh, it's interesting. I'm just scrolling down the page in the Guardian.
1688. Yeah.
Charles I, Charles II, James II. And now we're on to the date lines look right. James II was 1685 to 1688.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on and read it out. We've got a picture this time. So William III and Mary II, they obviously came in after the Glorious Revolution. And William accepted a free transfer of £1,000 worth of shares, equivalent to about £163,000 today. That was in January 1686. in the Royal Africa Company from its deputy governor, now the notorious Edward Colston. And for those of you who haven't seen Edward Colston's statue tipped into the waters of Bristol Harbour less than 10 times, then you mustn't be watching much on the telly, because it's just been seen so often, that imagery. The historian Dr. Brooke Newman of Virginia Commonwealth University has found that William III and Mary II made further wealth from the shares as England's profits from slavery expanded. So did William III marry Queen Charlotte?
No,
Who married Queen Charlotte then?
George III.
George, not William. I do apologise. It's 1:45 in the morning here.
Sorry.
Queen Anne. Queen Anne, she was 1702 to 1714. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm really having to rack my brains over remembering these stories. I know you're good at it, Vivian. Queen Anne's remembered from the Union of England and Scotland. I've done that once already, haven't I? Right, okay, I've done that. We're down to George I. I'm sorry, I went back too far, didn't I? And he made a large profit. And then we were on to George II. He was also a governor. Right, he was a governor and shareholder of this South Sea Company. And according to the Slave Voyages database, which I'm sure you all know about, it's the University College London, fantastic. No, it isn't. This is the Slave Voyages database. It's a database at Lancaster University produced, isn't it? Which collated records of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved people. Have you all seen the Slave Voyages database?
Didn't know about it.
Absolutely fascinating. I'll put it on in a minute. Vivian?
I don't want you to leave George II. Just give us 30 seconds to say that tomorrow, yes, when you sing Zadok the Priest by Handel, Handel, as you know, wrote that for George II's coronation, but Handel benefited from Jamaica because he was court composer to the Duke of Chandos, who owned the Hope Estate in Jamaica. And those estates are now occupied by the University of the West Indies, the University of Technology. And when you go to Papine, a little community near to those universities, there is a little lane called Chandos Place, named after the Duke of Chandos. I thought I would just bring in that history comes alive. And the University Chapel came from Trelawney, one of our parishes, where Queen Victoria's last surviving granddaughter, Princess Alice, was Chancellor of the university, and encouraged that the remains of this sugar warehouse in Trelawney would be better served as a chapel. That's now the chapel of the University of the West Indies. So when you visit Jamaica, do step into history. Thank you as usual, Liz.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for really bringing it to life. That's absolutely fantastic. Okay, then. So here we are. We're up to George II now, and his. Oh, and I was telling you about the Slave Voyages database. I do apologise. Let me just say about that. So it's a database which records every single transatlantic crossing. At the end of the session, I'll put the site on and you can have a look at it. It's absolutely remarkable. Okay, so the company took 41,923 African captives onto its ships between 1714 and 1740. The horrors of all of this are that it's so well recorded. More than one of the horrors, many horrors, more than 7,000 people died on these voyages. And when George III, what we're going on to next, was a teenager, he wrote an essay, apparently, arguing that slavery had no moral basis. That one out. And it's been cited as some evidence that the future king was opposed to it, but he continued to support the continuation of the slave trade and slavery, opposed to the abolition movement behind the scenes, according to the research by historian Brooke Newman for her forthcoming book, The Queen's Silence. So George III, was he the husband of Queen Charlotte?
Yes.
Right, very interesting then. Queen Charlotte being a black queen, a Moorish queen, whose hairdressers had a lot of problems with her hair, apparently, according to one of the bits of interesting history that I've read. George IV was 1820 to 1830. I mean, this just goes on and on. There's only one more king after this, though, that they recorded here, which sounds interesting. His lack of support for the growing movement to abolish slavery also helped to delay emancipation for years. His reign was marked by ruthless suppression of uprisings by enslaved people in the Caribbean.
Mm.
I'm sure, Vivian, you can tell us more about that. These included the response in Demerara, Guyana in 1823. And according to Michael Taylor in his book, The Interest, British authorities reacted with a massacre, on-the-spot executions and sentences of whipping. Enslaved people who were rebelled were hanged and decapitated, and hips on display on spikes. What horrible people these were. So they're doing pretty horrible things back home in Britain, though, at this stage still. Okay, so that's George the
Can I
Fourth.
just say that on Sunday at 2:00, the Socialist Historians group are doing a session on the 1823 Demerara Rebellion.
Oh. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, and I'm going
Okay.
to that's great. So we'll just talk about William IV. So he was on the throne just 7 years, but a very important 7 years, between 1830 and 1837. King at the time when slavery was abolished in 1833, but he'd always opposed abolition. Before becoming king, he held the title Duke of Clarence and spent time in the Caribbean, as we've heard, where he befriended the plantation owners and boasted of contracting a sexual disease. I think maybe that's the story that you've been telling us, Vivian, that he was there with Lord Nelson, and Cuba Cornwallis helped him get better. He devoted speeches in the Lords defending slavery, arguing that it was vital to prosperity, and he argued that enslaved people were comparatively in a state of humble happiness. Oh, goodness sake, illusion. Clarence House, today's home of King Charles I and Camilla the Queen Consort, was built for William IV in the late 1820s. Okay, so that is the Liz Millman PhD version of reading the the Guardian online. Okay, so it's a bit kind of simplistic though, really, just going through those points. So I'm just, Garrett, you've got your hand up again, and thank you for the clapping, Vivian.
Yes,
Liz,
it just goes to show, how easy you can find information. It's out there. It's in the public domain. It can be found. So anybody can find it. However, there was one little bit of information that you did not mention in King Charles II about the Duke of York. And I didn't know the Duke of York was a brother to King Charles II.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
He became James. Yeah.
That's correct. Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, we just have to, I mean, considering the number of us, both in Jamaica and in Britain, learned history and learned about our kings and queens really the amount that we actually know, but we didn't learn about this history. I remember doing an awful lot in school about James I. I think my history teacher was obsessed with James I. I can remember nothing whatsoever that she said about it. So I just thought this has no relevance to my life whatsoever. Anyway, right, off we go again now. And I'm now going to go back to the original PowerPoint, and I managed to press the right button. And this is about the cost of the crown. Now, this is again brilliant work by the Guardian's reporters, who are really working overtime at the moment, I'm sure. And they talk in their articles about the cost of the crown and how the British royal family hides its wealth from public scrutiny. Never mind about from public scrutiny, hides its wealth, I'd say, because I don't think a lot of people realise how absolutely fabulously wealthy they must be with all the artefacts and goodness knows what. Right, so today the Guardian's launching a new range of research called Cost of the Crown, an investigation into royal wealth and finances. In the coming days and weeks, like this is current, this was April the 5th. In the coming days and weeks, our reporting will reveal information in the public interest about the fortunes that have been quietly amassed by the royals by dint of their public function. Our reporting will also demonstrate the vast challenge of obtaining answers to the most simple questions.
Yes.
Jolly interesting. So that's that. And oops, Daisy, I just need to come out of this and enlarge it up so I can read it. Sorry. Until 25 minutes isn't quite long enough to do a PhD. Have taken a bit more time. So it also says that it shouldn't detract from Queen Elizabeth II's achievements to observe how this addiction to secrecy allowed the most unacceptable and corrosive practices to take root. In the past 3 years, official papers uncovered by The Guardian have revealed how the Queen and her advisors repeatedly abused the procedure of crowning itself to secretly alter British laws, including in 1973 as a part of the successful bid to conceal her embarrassing private wealth from the public. I don't know. Right. Okay, so that brings to an end my bit about that, and I'm just going to come out of this for a moment just to see if anybody else wants to add any other nuggets of knowledge about how the royal family were connected with the slave trade, plantation ownership, or any other things. I was just asked a couple of questions then. So Natasha, have you been following this stuff in the press?
It's become, I think, hard to avoid, and I think maybe that's due to the debate that came up again about the status of the royal family, with the coronation. How do the young people feel about it? So I have been seeing a lot of debates going on online about this topic, but not necessarily about slavery, but it's been more about the British public and where they stand in regards to the royal family. In fact, some women that I know here, it's like an international group, and they're not British, but they were very enthusiastic about going to London for the coronation. And she was asking which side of the road to stand on so she can get a picture of the king or prince to the king. And I thought it was very fascinating because everyone is a very, very, I think I was the odd one out, so I didn't say anything. But again, the conversation was, everyone's very enthusiastic, and some people wanted to go down to London to volunteer. I did not engage in the conversation because I would not be interested. But yes, I've seen this a lot in different social settings. Everyone is either very enthusiastic or they are feeling more comfortable with questioning the status of the monarchy. So it's interesting to see, because I feel like back in the day, that one wouldn't really be a thing. If you were anti-monarchy, you would be kind of making sure you were speaking in the right place, or people wouldn't be so bold. But now I think people are more emboldened to question the status of the royal family. So I've seen these conversations everywhere, but like I said, they haven't touched on the slavery or reparations. But I think it's a good start that we are questioning that in this day and age, the relevancy of the monarchy.
Thank you. I think that's fascinating, and it's interesting for me to hear. I'm not over there, but there's enough being talked about it over here, I tell you. Gary?
Yes, so while all this is going on, Liz, in relation to the royal family research, etc., Jamaica is making getting ready for to become a republic. So they've set a date. Vivian, is 2024. I understand that's the date that Jamaica would become a republic and throw away the royal family.
I want to say it's on the agenda. It's on the agenda.
I saw the interview on Jamaica TV just a few days back, having that conversation. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Things are happening. So this is not the morning to speak about the roads, Cecil Rhodes, but it is interesting that the flag bearer for Jamaica at the Abbey tomorrow will be the Rhodes Scholar, Jamaican Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, Mr. Salmon. And yes, it is interesting. And as I said yesterday, Liz, this is a message the ancestors are looking out, because we were told as children that ants would take the news to their ancestors at their graves. So wherever you are sitting at this moment and you see ants around you, please do not spray them. They are not mad ants. They are hurrying to tell their ancestors the news. This was impossible 100 years ago. And Mr. Salmon said, he was a former Gleaner reporter, that it could be that this is the last time such a position would be held. So he will now be another part of history.
Right, okay then. Well, it's all fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I promised, and before I forget, that I'd just show you the slavevoyages.org.
Oh, yes.
This is the, so it's slavevoyages.org, okay? And it's about exploring the origins and forced relocations of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic world. Now, it's an extremely comprehensive website, and I'm not even going to begin to get into hardly any of it, but it's incredibly powerful. There's an introduction by Henry Louis Gates, who's one of the the US's leading historians telling the stories of African history. So he's just amazing. So what I'm going to do is show you, if I can, the time lapse to view the movement of slave ships across the Atlantic. Can you see a little map of Africa in the middle of the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Just takes a little bit of time to roll up. Now this is 1620, 1664, 65, 66, 67. All those little dots are slave ships. 72, 64. You can see where they're coming from. See where they're going to. And I am just going to try and stop it. And you can stop it, so you can see where there were ships coming from. They might have been in, for example, the Gold Coast. All these different dots are different colours, because if they're green, they're Portuguese. There's a couple of green ones over here. Is there red? Is there British? There's a few big red ones here on there. There's France, blue one, a couple of those. Spain, they're yellow, can't see any of those. Netherlands, oh, busy on the quiet. The Dutch,
Yes.
a lot of orange ones. When you think about all those things we know about those times in Holland and the wealth, there's even the blue, a pale blue one for the US. Hey, Denmark and the Baltic places, Spain, Sweden. Had a really good professor one time came on to talk about the Swedish links with the
Yeah.
really interesting. Right, okay, so you've got a little bit of an idea there. So off we go again. 1690, 1691, 2, 3, 4. There's ever such a lot of ships.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop it again.
Wow.
And I'm going to click on one ship. And this is a blue ship. It came from France. It was the Neptune. It left Africa. The port was unspecified. But there were 869 enslaved people, and they arrived in Martinique. The port was unspecified, and they only arrived with 619 people. You can then further read more, because you can find what the vessel was named, who owned it, what they did, a load of other bits of information. Captain's name, how many embarked, how many disembarked. Just mind-boggling. And you can do that for every single dot, a red dot. This was a ship called the Charles, which is a British ship. It left the port a bit further down from the Niger Delta, with 562 enslaved people. And they arrived in Jamaica, but only 450 of those African people made the journey successfully. Can't really say successfully, can you? Right, off we go again then. Right, here we go. Right, more going over this. 1705. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I actually think it's disrespectful not to see the whole thing, although it's overwhelming to see the whole.
Yes.
King Charles has got a lot of viewing to make, Liz.
Yes, he has, yes. A whole lot. Right, well, we'll stop here and we'll pick another colour. See what the Portuguese were up to. Right, this ship left Luanda. Now, Luanda, not sure what this red line is here, accumulated captives. Anyway, it left Luanda with 486 enslaved people and arrived in Bahia. The port was unspecified, so maybe that's, watch that little dot, see where it goes when I carry on. Oh yes, it came down. That red line must have shown the route. Let's stop it again. See if we get another line. No, we don't. Look, there's loads of Portuguese ships here. Look, 1745. Loads of green Portuguese ships. You can spend hours looking at this. 49. What colour should we have? A blue one. That's France. See what they were up to. Now that shows that the ship came from here, and what route it went on. It went up to Cap Francis. Left Congo North. Mind-boggling. And you can see the places where the ships are streaming out to the Bight of Benin, streaming along here. Mind-boggling. the red one again. Oh, this one went to Charleston. And yes, you see this, the red line shows where it was going. And you know what we call the trade winds?
Mm.
The trade winds in the North Atlantic, they went that away, east to west. And then northern in the Atlantic, they would go at a certain time of year west to east. So they'd get up to Europe, and then they'd manage to sneak down around the coast of West Africa again and then take advantage. And they're called the trade winds. There's no illusion about it. What colour is this? Netherlands. See what they're up to. Right, okay. They went to Suriname. And again, you know, a totally different route. And so it goes on and on. It's worth just leaving it roll though and thinking of memories.
What date was the last journey ship, Liz? What was the last date?
Well, we're going to carry on running it if it's all right, Garrett, because 1797, that wasn't abolition. It was the trade in
1807
1807 was the
abolition. Yes,
abolished the trade in transatlantic trade in African. So
but it still continued illegally.
1800.
Yes. Continue.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is by 9. There's not a whole lot going. You can't reverse it, so you'd have to go all the way through again if you wanted to see how quickly the ships. But see, mainly then they're green ones. They're Portuguese, so the Portuguese were still busy and active.
Yes.
And oh look, there's a few red ones.
Yeah.
It's British road in Dominica. Right, so this is 1809. Now watch a bit more then, and then you'll see how it really begins to be mainly Portuguese.
Yeah.
Keep busy going. 1811, 14, 15, 16. What are those blue ones? France was at it. After the yellow ones. Spain and Portugal.
Yes.
With still at it. France are the blue ones. The orange ones are Netherlands. So yeah, here we keep going. And the British were attempting to stop all this, but they weren't doing an extremely good job at the time. Just unbelievable, isn't it? Oh, Ivor's joining us from Jamaica.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ivor.
So I guess what the British would have done, they would partner with other parties. So, you know, whether that would be Spanish or whether that would be France or Portugal, you know, although they weren't doing much after that, they had agreement across each other.
But this is 1848, and look, it's still going
on.
Yeah.
You on?
Yes.
Calming down a bit.
1865, everything came to an end. Should.
Really? Let's see.
1865.
66.
That's it, yes. That's right. 1865. That's
Well,
Brazil, United States. They would have,
Fascinating.
You know, one of the things that fascinated me as well, it's a sort of the complexity of slavery, is that I was reading an article online about trade with Sweden, and the reason that England is trading with Sweden is to get iron and timber, but mainly iron. And I'd always thought that we had lots of iron deposits in Britain if we built all those bridges and, you know, railway machinery and everything. But we didn't have that much. And the American merchants were going down to the Caribbean, buying sugar from plantations and then going up to Sweden and exchanging it for iron as well. And that must have been a huge boost after independence of industry in the northern states. So it's sort of, it's not just one story, is it?
No.
It's so complex.
Well, it's supply chain. The supply chain is massive. Yeah.
Yes, and that how could we have had an industrial revolution without a huge supply of iron?
Yeah.
Because
Birmingham is known as the Black Country. That's where a lot of the industries.
absolutely, yes, soot.
Right, just to say that there's a book coming out shortly by Professor Pat Hudson and some of her colleagues. I'll go back to the other thing in a minute, Michael. And it's Slavery, Capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. So come up on the Amazon page. And you can read a bit in there for free, like I do here in Australia. So it says this is a remarkable new book. The role of slavery in driving Britain's economic development is often debated, but seldom given a central place. And in this book, Maxine Berg and Pat Hudson follow the money to document in revealing detail the role of slavery in making of Britain's industrial revolution.
How much is it? Does it say?
25 pounds.
Get it out of the library, and that's good because there's more bought then.
Yeah.
And that it's not. I'm not sure if it's. Oh yeah, June the 1st. It's going to be released. So I know they've been working hard on it. So, but it's textiles. Pat's done a lot on textiles. We did a big project on that. Iron and copper smelting, steam power, financial institutions. Touched on that slightly, and slavery played a crucial part, and things you might think of as far removed from the taint of slavery, like 18th century fashions and indigo pattern cloth, tea, snuff boxes, mahogany. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating read. So I just wanted to let you know about that. Now, Michael asked a question, and I'm not quite sure. Here is. He says, will you talk about connecting the databases manually, looking at names in one and then the other? I don't know how to do that, Michael. I'm sorry.
No. This is really easy, because if you take someone like Bannister Talletons, they were slave traders in Liverpool. Yeah, Talleton. Yeah. So you look at Talleton on your slavery voyages database, yeah?
Hang on a minute, I've lost it. Let me just find it back up again.
Talleton, T-A-R-T, Talleton, yeah?
Right, just a minute, teach me how to do it.
Yeah, no, it's easy, If you type in Talleton, you just go in the search, you go back to your view, where you go to owners, where it says ship nation owner, yeah? Yeah, and just put Talleton. Whoops, so you got to the start there.
No.
Oh yeah, well, you just
go back to the one I was on before.
No.
Okay.
No.
Was it on the
Go up your, go come down again a bit more. So go to the transatlantic. No. Go to the transatlantic one. When it says transatlantic on the left, the top to the left.
Top left.
No, keep going up. I can't. Where's the transatlantic?
Right, yeah.
Sorry.
Go to the database.
Yeah.
Database. Click on that.
Oh yes, this is
okay. Then we're at the top. Okay, scroll to where it says ship nation owner, yeah, at the top, the second one in, yeah? And then go to vessel owner, type Talenton. Oh, hang on a second. Talenton's my man, I'm from Liverpool. What slave owners, what owners, ship owners do you know?
Pennant.
Well, put them in.
Apply. No data available. There was a ship called the Lady Pennant. But
Okay, no, this is the owner of the ship.
sorry.
The owner. The owner.
Database.
The owner.
Do you know any names of any owners?
Well, the one I know, as I say, is Talenton, T-A-R-L, Talenton.
Oops, a daisy, sorry. Talenton.
T-A-R-E-L-T. I think that's right, Talenton.
Apply.
Is that right?
Oh,
No, I'm going to say, I spelled it wrong, sorry. It's a, forgive me a sec, I've got to double check it.
Here we go, Dan. So you get good at this if you practice.
No.
You're all managing to stay awake over there in Jamaica. Ivor,
No.
I can see you.
It's T-A-R-L-E-T-O-N. T-A-R-L-E-T-O-N.
Say it slowly when I get into the right
Sorry
place.
about this.
Sorry about this.
Sorry.
Oh, sneak. Yes, I've got there.
T-A-R-L, sorry, apologies. L-E-T-O-N. Hamilton.
Oh,
So you see them. You know, like there's a ship called Bannister. If you scroll down, one of them is called Bannister. Scroll down. And you see.
vessel name. These
Yeah,
are
there,
all
it's at the bottom. You know, there now there's a major ballast. That's one of his sons, and his picture's in the National Gallery. And so if you can take that, and you can, if you then go to UCL UCL slavery compensation database, you can put in Talenton, and you can follow the money. You can see where they are.
I understand.
So you get that. And what's happening now? Exciting. People are doing these databases are being put together now. There's some work being done to link these databases, so you do it automatically. Some really exciting things done. But there's shed loads of information out there to the point where I say to people, put your name in any of these databases. Put your street name, your town name.
Yes,
and it's all there. It's rich. History made real. History made real.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that, Simon. It's glad that you're back again. And Roland was telling us earlier that his mother lives on Prince Alice. Is it Prince Alice? You're leaving a message there now. Just because I'm in the chat at the moment and I don't want to switch off before I haven't got the chat copied, so I'm just doing that. Sorry, just talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Right, okay. So I'm just going to save that, Roland, so that I'll put it onto the website now. Perhaps we'll in a moment have a moment to, oh no, it doesn't work, never mind. Right, okay, I'll do it later before we finish. Simon, can you make sure that you let me have the chat, please?
Of course.
Can you make sure that you send me the chat?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, I'd be very grateful. I was just trying to cut and paste it and I can't manage to do it. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, that was absolutely fantastic. So many contributions from so many people. And I hope just going through that one long article wasn't too boring, but
no.
I mean, it isn't as if this information's hidden.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, I don't know if it's hidden. It's untold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Untold.
Nobody looked for it.
Yeah.
That's
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, I think just before we go on to talk about Windrush, and what we're going to be doing and what the rest of the world, what others are doing, I would just wanted to give you an opportunity, Vivian, just disappearing when I'm speaking. Right, Vivian, can I just ask you for
Yes,
any
yes.
further comments, please? Thank you.
About
anything to do with what we've been talking about, if there's anything else you wanted to say to wrap up about what
well,
we've been.
my continuing concern is that we speak about it, but I'm not aware of any strategy for this generation or the generation yet unborn to be aware about what we are discussing. I just get the impression that we speak and it is put away into some shelf until the next 5,000 years. Because in the case of Jamaica, when you spoke, Liz, about having the glass and having exposed to it, and we thank God that you were in a better position. But I think of my own Jamaican ancestry, where we were, according to the sociologists, acculturation was imposed upon us, where we were half animal and half human. And those conditions still exist in Jamaica today in terms of the need for educational opportunities. Trelawney Parish, I've said it a million times, let me repeat, did not get a high school for boys to attend until in the 70s. The only high school that boys had direct access to in the 70s, Usain Bolt attended that school. We could have many more Usain Bolts. So when we have these discussions, I would want us, please, to have some strategies how we can pass this on to the decision makers to make planet Earth a better place.
Okay. I think that's a really, really valid point. And one of the things with Black History Conversations is that we started it really to educate ourselves, because you can't talk about our shared history unless you have some understanding of it. Now, I'm very interested, Sylvia, in what you've said about Enfield, for example, and looking at local history in Enfield.
Yes.
I'll just give an example. I grew up in a little village in Worcestershire called Blakedown, and the next village was called Hagley.
Oh.
So when I was in Kingston one day, being driven around, I noticed you had a road called Hagley Park Road. Well, surprise, surprise, there is a Hagley Park in Hagley. And I think the family there are the Cobhams, or Lord Cobham. Now, at this point, I get a bit vague on it, but one of the Governor Generals of Jamaica, I think he was Littleton. Is that right, Vivian? Littleton, we know the name Littleton. Well,
we had a Littleton, yeah.
Like the Pennants have Penryn Castle, and they're called Lord Penryn. They're called Lord Cobham, but they were the Littleton family.
Yes, in Hertfordshire.
Ah, that's interesting, because they're in Hagley as well.
They never had just one place ever, these people. They were on the move all the time, from big house to big house. And the richer they were, the more they had.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting when people drill down into local history. And that's one of the things that we've talked about doing, looking at history, country by country, county by county.
Yeah.
City by city, community by community. And Michael's with us, and we haven't talked about what the wonderful work Michael's done. He drilled down into one particular story, the story of the trumpeter, whose name I've forgotten. That was absolutely fascinating.
John Blank.
John Blank. Yes.
John Blank. I went blank.
drunk.
So when people really get into the detail of these stories, whether individuals, and sometimes like we had Lawrence speaking about, I've forgotten his other name as well, he was speaking about the story of Dido Bell, and when people have looked at, in detail at parts of the history, and then it's bringing it all together. But I think for children, Vivian, I think for future generations, the important thing is we understand our local history. And through the exploration of the local links, it kind of suddenly makes it real. Michael?
Guys, Vivian, this sense, people ask me, I want to know about Black history. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I tell them, you are history. Who you are, who your family are, where they come from, why they came in. This is Stuart Hall. When you ask someone where they come from, you get so that sense of, it's not just Black history, it's real history. So the sense of understanding, picking that. The second thing is critical thinking. Critical thinking. Don't accept the narrative. Don't accept, question, challenge, discuss, analyze. And sadly, when I was coming up, we were told history. I'm sure you know. History was A, B, C, D. And it was never, it was Q. It was Q, L, Z, P, Q. It was messy and horrible. But it's getting people to embrace that and understand that. And that's emotional. Because only today, bear with me, I've just listened to a podcast about Roger Bannister and his 4-minute mile. That's complete. There were people running 4-minute miles years ago. There were black, white people doing it. He was the first amateur. And then as you progress, you find out that he himself thought about, well, these Africans, and particularly the Caribbeans, they've got an advantage because they were slaves and they were toughened and made harder. So they're genetically better. He believed that. This is Roger Bannister. Sadly, he's gone now, so I can't attack him face to face. But we believe this nonsense. But I grew up believing that the fastest first man to make the 4-minute mile was this white guy. And it's not, calm down. It's not like that. It's more complex. It's giving people the tools. And that once you give people those tools, it disrupts the narrative then. Our island story's gone.
But do you know what? I mean, I went to teach in Kenya in '66, right?
Okay, yeah.
And the kids, in the boys' boarding school, they all ran barefoot, right? They played football barefoot. And so, fine, I come back, and the next Olympic Games, I think, was somewhere in America or South America or somewhere where there was a bit of altitude. And so all the English media were saying, well, they've got an advantage, you know what I mean? Because they come from Nandi district on the top of the Rift Valley, You can't win, can you, if there's an attitude behind it? And I was so angry, they run in their bare feet because they've got no bloody shoes, that's why.
I know.
So I know what you're saying. I'm just putting an oar in,
No, exactly. It's about who writes the narrative, who writes the story. That's the reality.
Yes.
But calm down. There are other realities, other ways into this story.
Yes. Well, I wrote a book for Haringey when I was working in an anti-racist team. And my boss had written a book, I don't know if any of you have come across it before, with his colleague. He taught at Tulse Hill School in South London. And it was called Black Settlers. And he produced incredible curriculum in the school. And so he wanted to he wanted to show very clearly that anything you said about a black person in the past, you backed it up with evidence. Every page had to have evidence on it, because that was, no one would take your word otherwise. Oh, he made that up. So
God, amazing. Can I just say, Sylvia, I think, you know, we need to go back and look at good works of the past and good ideas from the past. Let me just get Vivian to come in, please.
Yeah,
Vivian?
sorry.
It's all right.
Yes, yes. I just wanted to say, and this is a corollary to the point made by Michael, that there's an African proverb, which is for all nations, really. Until the lands have their own historian, the tale of the hunt will glorify the hunter. So we need to remember, regardless of our race and our country, we have to be honest.
Yes.
Honest. And this discussion this morning, we are talking about a period in the world where honesty was not a priority.
Yes.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you very much. Garrick?
Just a response to a couple of things that Vivian's mentioned about having a strategy to move forward. I mean, these conversations we have, you know, these conversations don't take place in the classroom. And, you know, the mainstream curriculum will not engage in these conversations. So, you know, we have to find other means of engaging people, both children and adults, because again, a lot of grown-up adults, you know, black and white, don't have this information. And so what we've been saying through these conversations, we need to sort of move out into communities with these conversations. And, you know, if you start to talk to your friends and your colleague about the things that, you know, just take what you learned today as an example, then those conversations can then continue and move on and get a bit bigger. So, you know, we're not keeping knowledge for ourselves, but we're trying to grow it and trying to widen that knowledge. And what Michael said, you know, Michael know very well, you know, colleague of mine that passed now, Eric Lynch. And, you know, Eric Lynch, he did the history walks, and he would, you know,
it's the walks.
He would tell people things that, you know, they wouldn't know just by seeing, you know, the carving on the building and what they mean and so forth. But the thing is, a lot of us are just content in what's been taught to us, and that's it. And it is true that having to challenge these things, and again, our children, because as parents, we need to be, you know, ensuring that our children have the tools to be critical and to search. And that would be not just history, but also in terms of religious books, in terms of what's been taught to people about Christianity and belief, etc. You need to examine these things yourself so that you can make your own decision once you're being informed about these things.
There was a point when that was happening in education here, and it was certainly happening in the 70s. And where
look back, I think, Sylvia. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you here.
Am I going off the subject? Yeah.
No, we need to think about the great works that were done then. And when people like, whose name has skipped out of my head, needless to say, just so many great people were really working on these stories. And then people like me kind of came in a later phase when we woke up that we needed to understand more about this, and then there are waves still coming forward. So it's really difficult because, you know, how do we do this? And Garrick, I know you've said on a number of occasions we need to, you know, think about what we're doing, and how
we've got a national curriculum which is completely cuts out all of this. That is the trouble.
Well, you do in England. Just don't assume it's the same everywhere, because Wales are trying really, really hard to include other including Welsh history. They're having to fight for that. And maybe Scotland it's different as well. So we do need to recognise that. Okay, I'm just going to show you a few books that I've picked out because Vivian might not have seen these. One of the
Yeah.
things, Vivian, is that I'm aware that there are so many books now published in Britain and the States about Black history, about our histories, that are not necessarily being made available to our colleagues in other countries. This one by David Olasuga, there's a big version of it, an adult version, Black and British, and this is you got, yes, there you are. Thank you, Garrett. Garrett's got the big version. I've got the children's version. And Voices of the Windrush Generation. Yes, that's lovely. We've got this really great book. I keep on about Wales because we mustn't forget about Wales because we were just as actively involved in trade activities. And this Slave Wales book is by Chris Evans. That's that's called The Welsh and Atlantic Slavery. And that's where we discovered there'd been so little work done about the cloth. And we set about, and look, here's my flyer. We set about a project called From Sheep to Sugar, and we've written that up, and that's being shared in all kinds of different ways now. But there are great books that come out of Jamaica and other countries. We in Britain are really bad at having books produced from other countries because they're not British. So it's good to have materials from other countries. And then there's the different relationships to Black history. This is an example. This is psychohistoriography, the post-colonial psychoanalytical and psychotherapeutic model by Fred Hickling. Now, Fred Hickling is referred to in this book by Alex Renton, because Alex met Fred before he passed, and Fred's wife, Dr. Hilary Hickling, she's helped the Windrush ambassadors with some training sessions, and just at the moment I'm just going to share this as well, because we have been joined at many sessions by the wonderful Jim Thakordin, Dr. Jim Thakordin, and he's written this book, Our Lives, Our History, Our Future, and it's really incredibly comprehensive. And as a little lad from Guyana, whose mother struggled to bring up her family, he's got so many stories to tell about his take on Black history. So those are just a few to share with you.
Lovely.
But, okay, next we've got Garrett.
Liz, you'll be interested in this as a teacher. See this book?
Yeah.
I came across this book only a couple months ago, and it's fascinating to read. And we talk about learning disabilities, etc. And this book, it's well worth reading, because what it does help us to appreciate, even though you may have a learning disability, right? You still have a brilliant mind.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. Yeah.
Thank you. Really good. So Sylvia, I'm going to let you have the last word of the recording.
Oh my God.
I should do, because it's been delightful that you've joined us today.
Right. I don't know what to say.
You don't have to say anything.
About what?
Just really, you've come along in on this session. You've not joined in on a session. You have one time before.
One time, yeah.
Do you think this is a useful way of
absolutely, because I'm very isolated because I'm housebound, and it's wonderful for me. And I had I can't remember if I told you this last time. I might not have done. But I went on a Zoom with the Socialist Historian Society.
Oh yeah.
And it blew my mind. Just one sentence that the speaker said. I had come to a block a mental block about writing up my research. And suddenly it all fell into place. I know exactly what I'm going to write. And it was because I was looking at different people in Enfield in the 18th, early 19th century, and I was not putting them in Enfield. I didn't ground them in Enfield. They were floating up here somewhere, if you know what I mean. And suddenly I thought, land, I've got to talk about the land. I've got to talk about the fact that a large part of Enfield was a royal hunting forest for hundreds of years. And that influenced how the town developed, what kind of community developed. And when in 1777, an Enclosure Act was passed that cut down all the trees, that is the posh part of Enfield. That's the one that has the Tory MP. You know, it's still, and that's where the big houses are, because that land had not been built on for hundreds of years. And suddenly it became available at a time when there were rich, really rich people living in the area. Or they don't stay, they might be renting or anything, but they buy land in Enfield, and that is their aspiration. This new class of people that emerge, who are from merchants, and they're socially not considered acceptable because they're not aristocracy. They're desperate to be recognized, and they come out into 10 miles out of London to Enfield. They can laud it, they can go to the vestry meetings, they have a huge influence and reputation, and they can whip in their carriage and be into London on the Turnpike Road fairly quickly and do their
That's fascinating to hear that, because we do have this term landed gentry, don't we? To differentiate from, you know, those people who made their money in other ways, which was looked down on.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Sylvia, for that.
It must be like it in Liverpool and all of anywhere around there where there were slave ships coming in, which was practically anywhere in the 18th century, wasn't it? If you've read Forgotten Trade.
Right, okay then, right. Come on then, Michael, what do you want to add
No,
to the...
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that. Let me take the other side of that. White flight. When my dad arrived in the 50s,
yeah,
so he's a Nigerian seaman. He came here in the 50s and lived here. White people were leaving, and they were leaving the big city. They were big shipping merchants, traders in the big houses, and they had photographers in Bold Street, the poshest street in the world. It was like Bond Street, and they had photographers in there who photographed them. So I've got a photograph of my family, and we are photographed like those elite who used to own those big houses, families together. My dad's there, he's proud of us, and exactly those group photographs that they took.
Yes.
So my dad has the same ambition as those upstarts.
Right, I'm going to be noticed. Yes.
Exactly, nouveau riche, and there was photographers bigging them up. So I love that sense of what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
Really lovely. Okay, so Natasha, you've put us a little note in here.
Yes,
book recommendation.
Yes, it's historical fiction, and it's set across like multiple generations, and it tracks two sisters from the Gold Coast until modern times. I think when she wrote the book was a few years ago. So it starts from, I think, the 17th century until like modern times. And I think it's very good at giving the reader a visual understanding of the multi-generational journey from slavery to, to modern times. I would recommend it for anyone that's interested in that. Although it's historical fiction, I think the author did a lot of research about slavery So I really enjoyed it. I read it with mostly Americans, and they were very keen to talk about the book because, again, it paints a very clear picture of kind of connecting Africans that were involved in the slave trade at the time, and then again, African Americans. So an interesting relationship there. And I think the book did a good job at portraying that. So I would recommend it to anyone.
That's fantastic. I was just trying to see if I could find a picture of it. It's easy to find on the internet, but I haven't got it. Oh, wait a minute, it was just about to appear then. My computer's as tired as I am. Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. That sounds absolutely fascinating. So the book is called Homegoing.
Yes.
I'm just going to, this is a New Yorker that I happen to have fall upon something on Google. So it's Yaa Gyasi's debut novel, Homegoing, a boy greeting a line of funeral. Yes, sounds absolutely fascinating. So yes, that would be a really good read. So I think that this sharing the books is a really good point as well. So thank you very much indeed for those of you who've shared that. I was going to say about Professor Gus John when we're talking about, people who've done so much work, but also, I'm full of respect for you, Sylvia, because, so many folks who were working in those, I would have said they were like halcyon days when we were, we had the London Language and Literacy Unit and that fantastic big black book that explained it all. Now, what you were saying, Vivian, about not, how do we keep the histories and things? I mean, one of the real tragedies, I think, of the British Library Service is that they when books aren't any longer new, they
throw them away.
Get rid of them.
Yeah,
and this is so we haven't got access to books, and so like taking a stand, Professor Gus John's book, you probably couldn't find easily in the library nowadays, and so
but you could buy it for threepence on Amazon or something. No, really.
Know about it. It's about knowing, isn't it? So yeah, I think I think there's a great deal in that, and thank goodness for books. That's all I can say, because when all these websites disappear, like our lovely one about Rastafari roots and development, we made a mistake and it just disappeared. Vivian.
Yes, and thank you, Liz, for accommodating me, because my story is so much to tell, but I'll make it a presentation in keeping with my height. You just spoke about Rastafari, and perhaps one of the tenets we have to embrace is this the prayer of the founder of Pennsylvania, William Penn, whose father captured Jamaica 1655. Now, William Penn prayed a famous prayer: God, help me not to condemn what I do not understand. We are here this morning on a journey of understanding. We are not condemning, we are forgiving, we are embracing, we are setting right, we are moving on. And we do not want to be hard on ourselves, but as we move along, there is a divine guidance which will direct us. So I am saying that you spoke about Rastafari. Who would have thought that the music of Bob Marley would be declared by the BBC as the song of the century, and his album Exodus by Time magazine as the album of the millennium? Who would have thought that a little girl who grew up in St. James, Glendevon, became the first person of her complexion as Anglican bishop in England, Reverend Rose Hudson Wilkin? Who would have thought that a boy born in Grangeville, Westmoreland, grew up in Bluefields, Westmoreland, by the name of Winston McIntosh, named after Sir Winston Churchill? his music as
Yes.
Giles My Keeper, Peter Tosh, would be sung at Canterbury Cathedral for the consecration in 2019 of Rose Hudson Wilkins. So the point is, we forgive, we move on, we embrace, and mission will be accomplished.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to wrap things up now from the recording point of view, and thank you, Vivian. One of the things I've tried to do, if we have colleagues with us from Jamaica right at the beginning of the session, I try to include a prayer. But I think what you've just said, Vivian, that is the prayer. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. Now, I'm not sure if Simon's with us or not, so I'll ask Simon, if you're with us, stop the recording, please.